those actions. If your answer to any of this is yes, then what we'll be doing today is just learning some of the things that would help us better be on that path. So, like she said, my name is Lara, and basically what I like to do is help people understand the basics of finances, because what I've come to realize is that unfortunately a lot of us go to institutions of learning, either high school, secondary school, university, or colleges, and they teach us everything about trying to make money, but no one ever really teaches us basics about even money and also working towards financial independence. And that's why this kind of conversations are really very important. So moving ahead, we will be talking about why it's even important for us to understand our personal finances. And we would see that one of the key things is that financial freedom really is a major key towards peace of mind. If you ask random people, let's say you take 10 random people, about 6 or 7 of them, one of the major stressors in their life has to do with finances or money, either directly or indirectly. Then also, apart from it, a lot of people are stuck in jobs that they don't really like, or they're doing things they don't really like just because they need to be able to make ends meet. So you'd see that if you have a bit of financial independence, you would have a more flexible life. It also gives you that sense of security because you know that at least your basic needs can be met. Then finally, it helps us protect, or it helps us get some form of protection towards life uncertainties. And the reality is that to be able to even get to this financial security that we're talking about 90% of it is based on what you know. So as I said earlier, there are certain key mechanics when it comes to wealth creation. It's just like you imagine, let's say you have 2 gears. To be able to work effectively, when it talks about wealth, there are actually 4 major gears. But a lot of people only focus on one, which is just making money. And then you're focusing on you increasing your salaries, increasing your sales, maybe getting gifts and inheritances and all of that. But if you focus on only one out of four, 1 out of 4 is 25%. I can assure you, I don't need to be psychic. You're going to fail at it because you can never make it with just 25% of what it needs to get there. The other key elements of it is that we need to be able to manage our money. And that will be talking about things around you ensuring that you are putting in measures or structures around how your money works. Then third is then putting in mechanics to be able to ensure that that money that you're having, you're able to multiply it. Because the reality is that every one of us has 24 hours. Even the very wealthy people, the likes of Elon Musk or even Warren Buffett and all of that, they all have 24 hours. So what then differentiates them from every other person you see on the street or people that aren't really making it financially? It's not the number of hours that they have. It's actually something extra that they know or that they're doing. But apart from it, if you're still stuck on the level where all of your time, you're equating it for money, then you're on the lower rung because you only have 24 hours. There's just so much you can do in that 24 hours. So you need to migrate from that level to a level where you don't have to fully exchange all of your time for money. You exchange a portion of it for money, but also your money then will be able to exchange itself to get more of its kind for you so that you can then buy back some of your own time and then be able to do something else. And then your money also keeps growing. And that's where things like investments and asset accumulation, which is the third point, that's where it comes to play. Then the last point is preservation of wealth. I don't know where the background of most of us that are joining this call from, but if we're largely from African descent, that's one area where a lot of us struggle. You find out that in people's lifetime, a lot of them might be able to accumulate wealth, but they are not able to make it transgenerational, where they are able to translate it to future generations. And that is where a lot of people in the Western world have that understanding, where they can translate it to the second, third, and fourth generation. And that is where preservation of wealth is. And to be able to do that, you need to understand things like having will, having a trust, and then also things like tax efficiencies, because they also help you to be able to effectively reduce things like inheritance taxes that you'll be paying at the end of your life, maybe when you pass and then your wealth is passed on to the future generations. Okay, so another thing to take note of, I just wanted to touch on these basic principles first before we get into the meat of the matter, because they help us lay a good foundation to what we will be talking about. There are also a lot of misconceptions that we will be correcting. I'm sure if you look at the screen, a number of us at some point, or even some of us still hold some of those misconceptions. One of the very common ones is that you think that wealth is about how much you make, which is tying back to the things that I said earlier. And some other people also think that, oh, it's only when they have a high paying job, that's when they'll be able to work towards financial independence. Or building wealth or being wealthy is actually about a lavish lifestyle. That is really very common in pop culture, where you see that someone who is deemed wealthy is then having all the flashy cars and all of that. But if you really think about it, the very, very wealthy people, most of the time they live several means below what you can see. Then lastly is, this is a common myth that a lot of people hold, is that they think that investment is only for the wealthy people. You think that, oh, you have to have accumulated at least a portion of wealth or a portion of money before you can start thinking about investment. But all of these are all wrong. They need to be demystified because none of them is true. So I guess key point to note is that for you to be financially independent, these items on the screen, they are very, very important, and we need to take note of them. The first one, which talks to the portion around everything that you earn, you have to ensure that a portion of it is yours to keep. And what that is trying to say is that you need to pay yourself first. I'm sure if you look at it on the surface, you might be thinking, so what is Lara saying? Of course, if I earn something, it's mine to keep. But the reality is that most times it's not. You would pay your landlord, you would pay the grocery store, you would pay the driver, or that's if you have if you have a car or someone driving you, or the transport fair person, or you pay the supermarket where you go to buy clothes and all of those things. So whenever you buy any of all of those things, or you give them money in exchange for all of those products, all you're doing is not keeping a portion of what you're earning for yourself. Is until you put some of it aside for your future, that really is then when you're ensuring that a portion of what you're earning, that you're keeping it. And that has to be the first thing. And I think that's only right. If you use all of your time to work, you should be able to keep a portion of that for yourself or for your future, which is you paying yourself first. Then the second key thing is that whatsoever money you have, you need to be able to give it direction. Because the truth is that anything in this life, if you don't give it direction, it has the potential to stray. And it can go in any direction. So you need to be able to steer it in the right direction. So imagine with me, you're driving a car, and that is why you have the steering wheel, to be able to tell it the direction to go to. If you're in a car, if you turn on the ignition and you don't use the wheel, you're going to drive yourself into a ditch. And that's the way it is with our finances also. If we don't tell our money what to do through things like budgeting, then that means that our money has the potential to do whatever it likes, and then it will grow wings and fly away. The third one is having an emergency fund. We'll talk about a number of these things in the further slides. So an emergency fund is basically...
I would like to say...
Sorry? Okay, so an emergency fund is you putting aside some portion of your money, which is covering your major living expenses for a few months, so that in cases of uncertainties, you have some money to be able to take care of such uncertainties, so that you then don't need to go into debt. Like I said, we'll talk about that in future slides. Let me just quickly run through this. The fourth point is, for those of us that work, this is more applicable to people that work in Western worlds. I know it's also applicable, for instance, in Nigeria, but more so in Western world. If your employer gives you pension contribution, please do not opt out of it. Take it, because that means that you're not leaving free money on the table, because it also helps you to be able to build your wealth. The fifth one is around high interest debts, things like credit cards. A lot of people don't know how much they're paying on their credit card. It can be really, it's a major source of slowing people down to get to wealth. So if you have a credit card and then you're not paying it off at the end of every month, your interest that you're paying on it, it can cripple your finances. So let me give a random example. If you have a credit card and the credit limit, for instance, is £2,000, and all you're paying is the minimum repayment every month, I mean the minimum amount, I can assure you that if you spend that £2,000, at the end of the day, the total amount you might be paying back to the bank might be about 3,000 plus, which I don't think is wise. So you need to clear off your high interest debt. The next point is around, that's when you can now start thinking about savings and investments for the long term. And then lastly is gaining financial information or education. This is really very important if we want to get far with our finances. So moving ahead, I told you that this previous slide talks about the key fundamentals or the foundation. So the first one, which talks to keeping a portion of what you earn and then giving your money direction, is then things around budgeting. So budgeting, basically, I know a lot of people hear budgeting and then when they hear it, they feel really very overwhelmed, that they are thinking, where will I start from? It's really very complex and all that. But I can assure you, budgeting is really very simple. What does it mean? It means that whenever you have all sort of income coming in, for all of your income, track all your income sources. So if all your income source is only your salary, take note of that amount, and then know your expenses, your standard living expenses. Put that in a category. Then other variable or discretionary expenses, also take note of that portion. Then the last portion is then around your savings and your investments. Now, this 50, 30, and 20 rule that I have here is not cast in stone, but usually that's what a lot of people go by. And for those of us that are Christians, for example, the portion where it says 20% towards your savings is even scriptural. If you recall the story of Joseph, when there was, when Potiphar had a dream, and then the dream was about the 7 years of leanness and the 7 years of fatness. You know what Joseph advised? He said that all the things that they will gather in their fat years, that they will keep aside a fifth of it. What's a fifth? Is 20%. And they'll keep aside a fifth of it to be able to take care of their lean years. And the truth is that every human being, you will always have a fat year, or you would always have period of fat years, and you would also have period of lean years. So it's what you've put aside in your fat years, that's where you'll be able to take care of your lean years. So that is it around that. Then to be able to make budgeting easy, what I always advise is that make use of tools. There are tools available to be able to help us with this. I mean, in the days of technology these days, there are a lot of tools that helps us to be able to make use of it, and it also helps us track spending. Now, this next slide is showing an example of what a basic budget should look at. It doesn't have to be very complex. You don't need it to make it very complex. All you need to do is that if you see the uppermost portion, you take note of your income. And if it's only one portion of income that you have, if it's only salary, then disregard the other rules. So take note of your salary, put it here. Instead of it being year to date, you could have it month to date. Now, the next thing is to pay yourself first, which is your savings. If you've decided that what you want to do is maybe 10 or 20% of your income, then put that amount there. Then your expenses, for your expenses, like I said, they should be in different categories. The first categories are your major living expenses. And for your major living expenses, which is what I showed here, which is the 50%, there are things you need to stay alive. Your clothing, your feeding, your shelter, and your utility. Those are the main things. Rule of thumb is that it should not be more than 50. That's the best practice. Even if it's going to be more than maybe 50 to 60, but as much as possible, we should live within our means. So those are your major living expenses. Now, the other discretionary ones are, okay, just because we're trying to also build wealth doesn't mean that we don't want to live a good life. I mean, we will travel, we will clothe, we will look good and all of that. That could be about 20% or less, depending on where you are in your financial journey. So put all of that in an Excel. And then what you should have is that you have a budget, which is your plan. And then at the end of the period, which is if it's going to be monthly, at the end of the month, you then have your actuals where you can compare how you have done, because it also helps you visually see how you're performing and areas where you need to make adjustments. And if you see, some of them then helps you show it pictorially, because it helps you see how well you're doing. If, for example, most of your money is going in a bucket that you shouldn't have it going into. So once you have then had a budget, the next thing is then to think about an emergency fund. Because like I said, life happens, no one knows tomorrow. I mean, there could be health issues could arise, or even for those that have cars, your car could break down, anything could happen. Or even for people that have jobs, you could lose your job. So that's why usually the rule of thumb is that you should have about 3 months worth of major living expenses. So that major living expenses will be this portion on the right-hand side, the things that you need to stay alive. At least 3 months worth of it, you need to have it put somewhere else. And if you ask me why 3 months, because usually it takes about 3 months to be able to get another job, usually. So that's why we've gone with the worst case scenario, that you should have that put aside. Because if you have that put aside, if life happens, you won't be under financial pressure or strain to go and take debts, and then you will have to be paying interest on those debts at the end of the day, thereby slowing you down to your financial independence. So the next thing then is that also, as part of emergency funds, how much you should have also depends on the dependencies you have. So for someone who is single, for example, you can afford to still fluke it a bit and maybe not save, and maybe not have that much in savings, as opposed to someone that maybe you have children, because you know that you have more dependents. So it's really very much more important for you to then have maybe about 3 months plus to be able to take care of such eventualities. Now, the next thing is that when you then have that, your emergency fund, what you do with it is also very important. And I'll tie this to savings. What I realize is that a lot of people, they put their money in a regular bank savings account, where the bank is only giving them maybe 1% or max 2%. You're doing yourself a disservice. Because let me tell you how banks work. And I've worked in a lot of financial institutions, so maybe that's why I understand some of these things. How a bank works is that they'll collect money from Mr. A, and then they'll give Mr. A maybe 2%. That money that they collected from Mr. A, they will loan it out to Mr. B at 20%. So at the end of the day, the bank is keeping effectively 18% for themselves. So why would you put your money in the regular bank and then just put it in a regular savings account? You're not helping yourself. Your money is not doing good work for you. Money that you've slaved hours to be able to get. You should put it in a high yield savings account where your money is also doing work for you, and then you're getting something out of it. So that I'm tying it to an emergency fund where that kind of money should not just be lying in a regular savings account. Ensure you put it in a high yield savings account. Right now, for those in the UK, I know a lot of banks are doing, or I know a lot of financial institutions are doing about 4 point something, 5, 6%. So if you have your money in any account right now and they are giving you anything less than 4%, please, if you don't take anything out of this training, go and take your money out of that place and put it in somewhere where you can collect at least 4% of the value of your money. Then lastly is that you can automate these things, because usually we human beings, we are emotional, we could be sentimental, and then if you leave everything to yourself the way you feel like it, you might not always do right by yourself. But if you've automated it, if you've set up maybe a standing order or a direct debit, it just works. When your salary comes in, automatically that set percentage flows into that account for your investment. But another thing is that as much as possible, usually when we start to progress in our career, let's say you have a salary increase or a promotion, my advice is that as much as possible, do not keep increasing the level of your lifestyle with your income. That's what a lot of people do. And I don't think that is wise, except at least to a good extent, you already have some form of financial security set somewhere. And this is more applicable for those that are now getting older. If you still have a lot of time, then you can afford to still fluke with it. But also in future slides, you would see that I showed you where time is really very valuable when it comes to building wealth. So I'm not going to stay too long on this slide. Now, the next slide is on taxes and pensions. Apologies to those that don't stay in the UK, because this slide is largely for the UK folks, but well, you can still glean general information from it. So this slide basically it's around how you manage taxes in the UK. I'll just quickly go through it because we have really very limited time, and I also want us to talk to investment point in the future slides. So when it comes to the UK, like I always say, the reality is that you and I can be earning the same amount, and we work in the same organization, we do exactly the same thing, and we might be paying this different amount in taxes legally. In fact, I've proven it to a lot of my friends at work. Most times I'm always getting a tax refund because I understand how taxes work in the country. And these are examples of the way where you can pay legally lesser amount in tax, because this information is also there on UK Gov, where the government has put it there. But one thing I've realized with the UK is that just because you don't know doesn't mean that they will come and knock on your door and say, take this extra money. You're just forfeiting the money. An example is the ISA wrappers, where you have a limit of £20,000 to be able to make any form of investment or put your money in a savings account or whatever, such that you do not pay taxes on the yield of that money. And okay, maybe I should step back to explain. In the UK, every form of income that you earn, either income from your job or income from sale of assets or income from investment or income from savings, should be taxed in the UK. That's the way the UK economy has been designed. Yes, they might give you some allowance to the amount that you will pay. So for example, for savings, if you're a basic taxpayer, you will be able to get interest on your savings to the tune of £500 per annum. Anything more than £500, they start to tax it. That's on your savings account. So they tax everything. So you need to be able to then understand how to be able to put your money in things that, excuse me, the UK government has also put in place to be able to help you reduce the amount of taxes that you'd pay. Before I move on from these ISA wrappers, another thing I want to say is that if you're in the UK and at some point you ever plan to buy a house and you're less than 40 years, please, if you don't take any other thing away from this call, go and open a LISA account. There, for every £4 that you put in that LISA account, the government will give you a free £1 back to make £5 to a cap of £4,000. So if you put in £4,000 in a year, they will give you £1,000 on that 4,000 to make 5,000 towards your home purchase. The next point is around gift aid to charity. So if you're a Christian, for example, or even if you're not a Christian, if you give to charity organizations, I think like Brooks Sparkle, for example, every of your donations, if they're a registered organization in the UK, every of your donations to charity organizations, including your tithes and offerings to churches, you shouldn't have been taxed on that money. If you had been taxed on that money, you can go and get back your money from the government because you shouldn't have been taxed on it. Then if you invest in gold coins using the Royal Mint also, you never get to pay capital gains taxes on it. Lastly, around pensions is that, like I said earlier, if your employer matches your pension contribution, because pension is another way to be able to reduce your tax burden. In fact, as it is, up to the tune of £60,000, the money you contribute into pensions up to the tune of £60,000 doesn't get taxed for every year, and you can transfer it for a period of 3 years. Then lastly, is that I keep hearing a lot of people that say that, oh, so, but then pension, by the time you retire, they will still tax it later. Yes, I agree. But the truth is that what they are taxing later is the 75%, the remaining. So you can take out 25% of that money tax-free. That's one. Then second thing is that because you've given your money an early start, you've given it a potential to be able to quickly grow on time. Even by the time they will be taxing it much later, you're still better off than it being taxed now. Now, I'm going to be moving on to the more interesting part, because we've talked about you budgeting your money, you having an emergency fund, you saving your money, and then how to work around taxes and pensions. All of that are really very good. They're foundational. But the truth is that you cannot build true lasting wealth by doing all of that alone. They are very important things you should do, but just that can't help you. You need to invest your money. And that is where you can see the long-term growth. And that is where real wealth can be built. And how investment works is that it works on something called compounding interest. I'm sure you've heard of the statement where they say there are 7 wonders of the world. Well, compounding interest is the 8th mathematical wonder of the world, how it works. And I'll quickly explain it to us as quickly as possible. So if you have $1,000, for example, and that your $1,000, if you hold on to it, maybe keep it in your house for a period of, so this lower portion here that you can see, the 0 to 18 on the lower, on the horizontal line, that is the time. While the vertical line, as you can see, dollars in front of it, that is what the amount looks like. So the green portion, which says principal, is that if you have $1,000 as of today, and you put it aside, let's say in your house, for a period of, let's say, 20 years. At the 20th year, what you will still have is that your paper $1,000. But in reality, that your paper $1,000, the value would have reduced because of something called inflation. So that means that in true essence, that your $1,000 is no longer $1,000 at the end of year 20. And let me explain inflation. When we were all younger, maybe you used to buy maybe a bottle of Coke for maybe, for those of us in the UK, I'll just throw numbers. Maybe you used to buy it for maybe 20p. Now it's about a pound, maybe a pound 20p. So that is basically what inflation is. Inflation is that the value of your money can no longer buy what it used to buy. So that's inflation in simple terms. Now, simple interest is that you are getting interest on just your $1,000. So at the end of year one, if the interest they're going to give you on your money is 10%, at the end of year one, you would get $100. At the end of year two, you will get another $100. Year three, $100. So it's $100 on your 1,000 because that is what the percentage is on your own flat money. However, compounding interest doesn't just give you interest on the principal amount, which is under your $1,000. Compounding interest gives you interest even on the interest you have earned. So at the end of year one, you know your money is now $1,100, your $1,000 that you brought, and then the $100 interest. What compounding interest will do is that it will not only give you interest on the $1,000, it also gives you interest on the $100 that you got interest on. And that is why compounding builds very quickly, such that at the end of year 20, your $1,000, if it was just principal, would still have been $1,000. If it were just simple interest, would be $3,000. But being compounding interest will be way more than $7,000. Now, the thing is that if you even see this chart, at the beginning, you don't see compounding interest working, which is the purple side. You might think it's not doing anything, but you give it time. And that is where the beauty of compounding interest is. Like I always ask the question also, the human population on Earth, how do you think that we grew? Did you think we grew by simple interest? It's compounding interest. Because if the first man and woman God created, Adam and Eve, if they are the ones still giving birth to children, they are the principal. It wouldn't have gotten to my turn, neither would it have gotten to your turn. It's because their own children too were giving birth to children, and think of the children to be the interest. So this slide also better illustrates it. If you have $10,000, it starts to really grow. And I think another interesting thing I wanted to show here is that let's take that same $10,000. How long does it take for $10,000 to duplicate? in this particular chart. So the $10,000, it reaches $20,000 somewhere around here between the 6th and the 7th year. That's when it duplicates on the simple interest. The simple interest is the blue line, while the compound interest is the amber line. So it takes about 6 to 7 years for it to duplicate on the simple interest line. But on the compound interest line, you see that it takes shorter, 5 years. But also, it took 5 years for you to have additional 10,000 to the 10,000 you started with. Now, for the next 10,000, it takes a shorter time. Between 5 and 8 years, you had another 10,000. Now, between 8 and year 10, you have another 10,000. So this is showing you that the farther you go, it starts to duplicate a lot faster. It's like a snowball effect. At the beginning, you might not see it working, but later on, it starts to build up really very quickly. I often ask a lot of people that, do you think you can ever have a million pounds in your account? Yes, a lot of people say yes, but they don't know how. This is an example of how time helps you to be able to achieve that. Imagine with me that you have 300 pounds every month and you invest it in something at 8% that it's compounding interest. After a period of 20 years, that's your 300 pounds that you're putting in every month. The total value would have been 176,000 pounds. But the amount that you actually contributed was 72,000 pounds. If you ask me how, 300 pounds, which is monthly, times 12, there are 12 months in a year, then times 20 years gives you 72. So that means 72,000 left your pocket. But because of compounding interest, that 72,000, the worth at the 20th year is 176,000. Now, imagine you had 10 more years to be able to still keep investing that your 300 pounds every month. The total will be almost 500,000 just by 10 additional years. You see, it's more than doubled the future value. And your own contribution just increased by another, say, 28,000, because the total that you've now contributed is just 108,000. Now imagine you did it for 40 years, not 20, you added another 20 additional years. You see that the total value then equals £1,000,000 just by having extra time. So what all of this is just trying to show is that it's also important to start early. Because if you don't start early, you will need to do a lot more to be able to catch up. Now, if I flip the scenario, if someone else wanted to just get this same £1,000,000, let's say they had 20 years, they didn't have 40 years. If you imagine how much they would need to contribute every month to be able to have that £1,000,000 in this same investment portfolio, please, could you drop it in the chat section, how much you think they would need to contribute every month to be able to get it? I want to see us in the chat drop what you think the amount they will need to contribute every month. Let me repeat the question. Every month, if you have only 20 years to invest at an 8% interest rate, how much do you think you will need to contribute every month for 20 years to be able to have the same £1,000,000? So any takers, don't worry, you can just guess. There's no right or wrong answer. I'll tell you the correct answer. 500. Thank you, Jaye. Okay, so who else? Any more takers? Let's have about 5 more quickly. Brooke Sparkle, thank you, 500. Any other person? Don't worry, there are no right or wrong answers, and I don't have any gifts to give. So I just want to see us think about what we think is needed to be able to get that same £1,000,000 in 20 years. So don't be shy. Thank you, Simi, 350. Abimbola, 500. Yinka, 600. Thank you. Can I have two more people, two more takers before I quickly wrap it off? Because we don't have a lot of time anymore. Okay, no more takers. I'll tell us the answer. And thank you all for providing answers. But the reality is that you would need about £1,600. So imagine someone that started early. They were just doing £300, but because they had 40 years, they were able to achieve it. As opposed to someone that started much later, they will need to do not times two, not times three, not times four, about times five to be able to get the same result in half of the time. So what I'm just trying to tell all of us here is that if you don't take any other thing from this lesson, I know there are about 3 things now that I've said if you don't take from this lesson, is that you don't have to wait till you have all the money to start. Just start. The earlier you started, the better for you. So now you can then ask me that, okay, so yes, we've heard all of these things. What should I then be investing in? Now I'm going to get us into, but I'll quickly try to rush through this because I see we have very limited time to go. So now, when it comes to investing, there are things called asset classes, and there are 4 major broad categories of asset classes. You must have heard some of these things, but I'll quickly go through it. The most common one, which is the right one on the lower quadrant, is real estate. We all know it. Buy properties, invest in real estate. So that's one. Another major asset class is equities. Equities means ownership. So if you own your own business, for example, or if you buy stocks of companies, or if you have a friend that is doing a business and then you invest in their business, partnership and everything, anything that has to do with businesses or companies' ownership is equities. Another major asset class is commodities. So for example, you investing in precious metals, gold, silver, and the likes. The last major asset class is fixed income, things like bonds, treasury bills, and commercial papers. Now, let me mention here that also with these asset classes, they have different levels of risks. Some of them are more risky than the other. In fact, the ones on the right-hand quadrant are more risky than the ones on the left-hand quadrant. But also, the ones on the right-hand quadrant also have a higher potential for return as opposed to the ones on the left-hand quadrant. So that's the first thing to take note of. Then some are more liquid than the other. What does liquidity mean? It means that if you need to be able to get money out of it or easily get your money. So if you have real estate, for example, is not liquid. You can't need, let's say, £5,000 and you have a house. You can't quickly get £5,000 out of that your house. So it's not really liquid. But if you have, let's say, fixed income or your money in bonds or treasury bills, you can easily quickly sell it. So that is liquid. And then another thing is barrier for entry. For some of them, you cannot just start it with any amount. An example is real estate. You cannot start investing with real estate with £10, but you can start investing in equities with £10. So those are the key points to take note of. But what am I trying to say in all of this slide is that understand the different asset classes, but also more importantly, is to understand that diversification is also very important, because at different times in the economies of the world, different asset classes behave differently. At some time, property market could be booming. At some other times, it could be a lot of stocks and all of that. So different things boom at different times. Now, to move on to the next slide, this slide is just trying to talk about diversification and asset allocation. So if I were to give us a rule of thumb, is that you don't need to have all the asset classes, but try to let your target at the end of the day be to have at least 2 of them. If you have more than 2, good, but at least you should be able to strive towards having at least 2 of them. And the reason is because it also helps you balance your risk. That's one. Then second, it keeps you more protected. Then third, because the rate of yield or returns on them differs, it helps you have a better spread. So if I give an example, someone that is really very young, they can afford to take a lot more risk because they have more time to play with, as opposed to some that are already in their 40s or 50s that are closer to retirement. I don't expect the person to be taking a lot of high risk stuff. They need things that are more stable, that would ensure that they would get consistent income over time. So that's what this slide is largely showing. Because of time constraints, unfortunately, I may not be able to go into a lot of depth, but let me just quickly run through. Now, I took equities as an example because, like I said, is one of the ones that is easy to start. That's one. Then second, because you also don't need, because the barrier to entry for it is a lot lesser. So this is not a financial advice. It doesn't mean you have to do equities. You could do the cash equivalents, for example, or you could even do commodities. But real estate, most likely you might not be able to do it until you have some substantial level of money. So let me talk about equities. So if you have a personal business, for example, investing in your business is a good thing. Then another thing you could try to do is you could also invest in other people's business, and that is where stock and shares comes to play. One advice I always give is that, please, if you're new to investing, if you don't understand the rules of investing, do not buy individual stocks unless you have the skills and the expertise to be able to pick a good stock, or else you might pick the wrong stock. And right now, everything is to a good extent booming. So you might think what I'm saying might sound foolish, but I'll give you an example. For those of us that are a bit older in this webinar, you would remember in the advent of phones when they just started coming out. The example I like to use is Nokia. Then Nokia was like the heavy force. Who would believe that Nokia would no longer really be profitable these days? Imagine someone had put all their money in Nokia, because we all don't know tomorrow. So that's why, as much as possible, I usually advise that individual stocks are very volatile. I'm not saying they're not good, but you need skills to be able to pick a good individual stock. So that's why I advise, as much as possible, start with what they call index funds or ETFs, if you are a novice when it comes to stock and shares. Index funds is, in fact, let me give an example. This is the example I like to give. Imagine you go to a 5-star restaurant where they have a buffet, where they have multiple food, whatever food you can think of, the ones you've seen and the ones you've never seen. Would you just carry your plate and just go to one food item, put that food in your plate and go back to your seat and go and sit down? Or would you rather take small portion of most of it and then try it out to see how it is? Because you might even see that a lot of the combination, you're able to have a portion of everything so you can have a spread of it all. And that's the way index fund is. It's like a basket of a multiple pool of companies, and then you buying the index fund is you having ownership of small of all of those companies. An example, for example, is maybe the S&P 500, which talks about the top 500 companies in the United States. That way, you don't need to be thinking that, is it Amazon I should buy, or Nvidia, or Google, or Apple, or am I sure I'm picking the right one? Because once you buy that index fund, you already own a portion of all of those top companies. So those are examples. Or maybe the MSCI World, where you are buying the top companies in the world, so that you are very well diversified across different sectors. Because even those top companies also, they just don't look at one sector. Now technology is the booming thing. Who knows, maybe it's going to be health that is going to be the next sector that will boom in the next coming year. So those are the things that would help you in making good financial decisions. Now you might ask me that, okay, so now I understand these things. Where can I buy some of these things? There are a lot of platforms where you can buy them, and you don't even need any other person to help you. By yourself, you can start to buy in some of these platforms. Example is like the Trading 212, Invest Engine, Vanguard, and co. But let me quickly mention something. Please, any platform you're going to put your money, even if it's a savings account, even if it's investing, in the UK, ensure that it is FSCS protected. That means that if the organization should go bust, you would be able to get back your money to the tune of £85,000. So that's like a sort of protection that you have. Then another thing is that, remember I talked about taxes in my previous slide. Any investment you're going to be doing, ensure you invest through the ISA wrapper. At least exhaust your 20,000 free allowance first before you start to invest out of your ISA wrappers, where you are now paying taxes on the money that is not even enough before. So those are other key things you should take note of. Then here also you see the Royal Mint. If you choose to want to invest in gold, you can actually buy gold, as in real gold coins or gold bars here in the UK through the Royal Mint. If you buy gold through the Royal Mint, for example, if you sell it, you never get to pay capital gains taxes on them. So I'm going to pause. I know I've said a lot of things. Yes, I'm going to quickly pause and then we can wrap up the session, especially for questions.
Thank you very much, Miss Lara. It's been very, very insightful and very valuable. For me, I really appreciate the fact that you're able to break down some complex concepts to us, and you've made it very practical and in a very easy to understand language. But so I have some questions that was sent to me earlier. We'll just tackle that. But if it's okay, if you would also drop your questions in the chat box, and then we'll deal with it one after the other. So well, the first one, I can see the answer on on the screen. Actually, it says that what are the best opportunities? I mean, best places to put my money safely and putting risk at the barest minimum. So,
Okay, let me also quickly touch on that. If your aim is that you don't want any form of risk or the minimum risk, then what I would say is you might be looking at things around cash and cash equivalent. So example is to put your money in things like bonds or high yield savings accounts. But to be honest, also, if you don't want any form of risk or the merest risk, your potential for return would also be low. And building wealth usually cannot happen in this left-hand quadrant. Usually you build, if I think of any, like I was speaking with my cousin earlier today, and I said, mention any wealthy person you know in this world, and I'll tell you how they made their wealth. It's either through equities, one way or the other. Either they had a business or they invested in a business or it's real estate. You cannot build real wealth just by being on the left-hand quadrant. But they also help, at least they are better money management tools. So for starters, yes, you can start with things like bonds or high yield savings accounts. So if I give an example, Santander Trading 212, they have a cash portion where they're giving about 5% on your money. So that could also help. Let me not dwell too much on that, but I hope that answers.
yeah, we hope that answers the question. If the person is online, also if the person would eventually listen to the recording later. Okay, so there is another question, but I think you touched on it briefly. But if you can also expatiate on that, that would be very good. And is it how wise is it for me to opt out of my pensions?
Not wise. But don't even finish it. Not wise. Never. Do not opt out of your pensions. It's free money. So take it. Free money first from your employer. Free money because you're not paying taxes on that money. So do not. I wish we had more time. Like someone was asking me that how long would I like for this kind of session? I'm like, there are topics that I like to talk on that I can do it for 2, 3 hours because I've done such sessions before where it was that long. I would have shown you numbers as to how much you're losing if you choose to opt out. So please do not.
Okay, so another question says, I earn, I think, okay, no, wait, let me go a bit. So it says that, please explain SIPP. I don't know what that is in details and how I can benefit from it, bearing in mind that I earned just 1,300. So that's what the person put. So I
Okay.
don't know what SIPP is, but I'm sure you probably understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So SIPP is the self-invested personal pensions.
Okay.
When it comes to pensions in the UK, there are different ways. There's the workplace pension. That's the one most of us are automatically enrolled to. And that other question that person said, can I opt out of my pension? That's the workplace pension they were hoping to opt out of. So that's a workplace pension. Now, there's also another kind of pension where you can choose to invest your money by yourself rather than it being by the pension company. So that SIPP is such an example where after your salary, any salary you receive is already taxed. So that money you got as your salary, let's say out of which you want to invest maybe 50 pounds. If you put it in an SIPP account, what it means is that that 50 pounds in that SIPP, the government would pay back 25% of that 50 pounds. So that would be, I hope my math is still right. So that's about 10 pounds, if I'm not mistaken. They will add 10 pounds to that 50 pounds to make it 60 pounds. So what I'll just say basically is that SIPP is also very great because you're getting back free money in quotes from the government, and then you're investing the money by yourself because you can choose to tell where you want to invest the money in by yourself.
Hmm. I'm sure I'm sure we'll still have to bring you back, Miss Lara. You just
No worries.
Okay, so there is another question. It says that how much can I pay into my pension yearly as a business owner?
Okay, so as a business owner and as an employee and as everybody, 60,000 yearly. But you can also carry over the from 3 previous years. But 60,000 is the threshold. So, for example, let's say this year I pay in 60,000. Next year I can pay in 60,000 also. So every year is 60,000. But let's say last year somehow it was 20,000 I was able to pay. And this year things really boomed. I have 40,000 from last year. So that means this year I can then do 100,000.
Mm, mhm. Okay, so the next question, sorry, there are so many questions here, but I think it's similar to the one. Okay, I think it's similar to the one that we've also touched on already. It's just about where you can invest without being taxed. So I think,
ISA wrappers.
yeah,
The example
ISA
is trading
wrappers. Yeah.
212 Vanguard. In fact, most of the ones I showed on this slide, most of them are ISAs. So Invest Engine is an ISA. Trading 212 is ISA. Angrips Lansdowne, I think. Interactive Broker is ISA. Vanguard is ISA. But let me also quickly mention, please also, when you're thinking of investment, you also want to look at low cost because you also don't want to pay a lot of charges when it comes to items that you choose to invest through.
Mm.
Yeah, let me just put it that way because so that we don't go around in circles again if I try to
Yeah.
explain it beyond that. Yeah, but
Yeah.
charges is another thing you want to take note of because they also eat into your yield.
Okay. 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 So, sure, we'll be getting, I'm going now to the chat box, but I think more questions are coming to my personal phones in a minute, but I will come back to them. Okay. So I'll go to the chat box quickly. So the first one says that, is there a restriction to invest through ISA? Is there any form of restriction to invest through ISA? That's the
So
first
to
question.
answer that, the first answer is no. On the surface, no, there's no restriction. The only limit is that you can't invest more than 20,000 per year. And that one is non-transferable. So if you lose your 20,000 this year, let's say this year you're only able to invest 5,000, that's the end. It zero rises. In fact, our tax year is coming to an end in the next 7 days. Or
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so you can quickly take advantage of that. So
Mm-hmm.
there's no restriction. However, if you use the lifetime ISA, remember I said another thing to take away from this call, if you will ever buy a house and the value of your house would be less than 450,000 pounds, please just go and open an ISA because they will give you free money through it. Now, I mentioned ISA because there are two types of ISA. There's the cash ISA and there's the stock and shares ISA. Now, there is a limit on the lifetime ISA, either the cash or the stock and shares lifetime ISA. That has a cap of 4,000 pounds. But generally, ISAs, the max is 20,000. So beyond that 20,000, there's no other restriction. You can flex as you like.
Okay, so quickly before I put the last question, I mean, before I take the last question, I'm going to put the feedback on form on the chat box. So please help us fill it. And then it's just so that if you have other burning questions, by the time we bring Miss Lara on, I'll be able to help us tailor the need of the next webinar. So I'm putting the feedback on the chat box. Please could you respond to that quickly, and then we will take the last question, I suppose, because I haven't received any. Oh, sorry, another question's come to my phone. Can I use ISA for a second or third property?
No. Thank you
Okay.
for asking that question. I should have mentioned no. It's the first property, yes. But if you now have money in your ISA, you can then leave it for retirement. So there are only two purposes for life. Oh, sorry, please ask that question again. Can I use ISA? Is that the question?
Yes. For
Okay, so let me clarify.
okay.
When it comes to ISA is like the mother umbrella. Under ISA, you have children. There is the lifetime ISA, there's the cash ISA, there's the stock and shares ISA. ISA as an umbrella, you can use it for anything you like. But the first child, which is the lifetime ISA, or people call it LISA, that's the one where the government gives you free money.
Mm.
For that one, you can only use it for your first house or for retirement. If you use it for any other thing, you will be penalized. So I hope that clarified.
No, yeah, yeah, we don't want any. We
Yeah,
want
we
to
don't
make money,
want
not to get penalized.
that.
Okay,
Exactly.
so please fill the form quickly, and we'll take the last question, I hope. And yes, so it says that please can you shed more light on how to get on board with S&P 500 and how much is the minimum amount to start with?
Okay, so good question. Thank you. How to get on board with S&P 500? First and foremost, maybe I should answer the last question. How much is the minimum amount? £5, £10, any amount you have as the spirit leads you. How can you get on board with it? Any of the platforms you can see on my screen, you can start there and start to buy it there. So trading 212, for example, most times people hear me saying trading 212 because they don't charge any fees. I like low cost things because you also want to keep as much of your money as can. So you can start to buy it from places like trading 212. If you log on to trading 212 and then you subscribe and you do all of those details. And let me quickly also mention all of these platforms are also FSCS protected because I want to put that out there. So if you get onto trading 212 and you get to the portion where it says stock and shares, you can go and search for S&P 500 and you would see different platforms that have their own S&P 500. But you don't need to bother because most of them are tracking the index fund called the S&P 500. So most times you're fine with those. But also take note of their charges because different ones will then have different charges so that you're picking the one with the least
Mm,
charge.
mm. I mean, Miss Lara, your passion and your enthusiasm is just very contagious. I really, we will host you again. And if you agree with me, I think you should drop your emojis. I'm dropping mine now. Most definitely, we'll definitely bring you online again. And please put your feedback in the feedback form. I am so, see, 100% coming for you.
Thank you.
We are so grateful at Brook Sparkle Project to host you, and we know how extremely busy you are. But of course, we will circle back at some point and fix an earliest date as most convenient for you. Please and please fill the feedback form. It will help us know how best to tailor the next finance topic. And we are so grateful for your time. We know it's a
I'm
very
sorry,
hot.
if you don't mind, let me just quickly wrap up.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
because
yeah.
I wanted questions before I wrapped up because this
Oh,
slide
yeah,
is
go
very
for it.
important. Yeah. So I most times, especially when I'm speaking to those of us of Black descent, I like to show these statistics. So it's not just someone that drew this up. It was in the United Kingdom, is the data by the ONS, and it was for data between 2016. If you see on the lower corner, April 2016 to March 2018, when an assessment was done. See the spread or the distribution of wealth by ethnicity in the UK. I think this is something that is very important for a lot of us that have Black or African descent to take note of. You would see that across the different areas of wealth, Black Africans have the poorest spread of wealth. Our fellow Indians, for example, they are the second. And I think this is very important because, and it ties back to what I said in the previous slide, where at times some of us also think that lavish lifestyle is a definition of wealth, but in reality, that is not. You see, physical wealth is where it seemed we trumped a bit, where our show of cars and all of those. But genuine net financial wealth were really below tens of thousands. So, like I always like to say, is that now that you know all of these things, because it's not enough for you to know all of these things. It's not the depth of what you know, it's what you're doing with it. There's a scripture that says that now that you know all these things, happy are you if is the if you choose to do something about it. I'm sure at some point you all may have heard some of these things or something that sounded slightly like it, but you then don't necessarily do anything about it. And the best time to start investing is now, or was yesterday. The next best time is now. So please do what you have to do, if not for yourselves, even for your children. The best gift you can give to your children is not having to depend on them for their, for finances when they grow up. So please, let's try and do that for ourselves. Um, and also let us invest in financial education. Really, very, very, very important. So if you have any more questions, I'm happy for you to reach out to me. And also, possibly if you want any personal consultation, because we do all of that also, you can reach out to me on Personal Finance Buddy, and then we can take up the conversation from there. We do hand holding where we help you and guide you through all of those things, but it's also giving you the information you need so that you make those choices yourself. Thank you very much once again. I really appreciate this Brooks Sparkle project for the time, the opportunity. I thank God for the avenue to be able to share some of the things we know. And also thank you all also for the questions, for making it engaging, because it would have been terrible if I did all of this talking and then no one asked any questions. So thank you very much and God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Miss Lara. Just do it. That's all I'm going to end you with. Just do it, just like Nike. And we've only had 3 responses so far from everyone. Please put your responses in the what's it called, the Google form. Thank you for your comments. We are grateful for the opportunity. The next webinar will definitely be in May, slightly different from what we're used to. Let's keep the suspense, and we can't wait to host you again. Tell everyone about us. How can you tell us thank you for this masterclass? We've not asked for any fund at the moment, so we would just like you to follow us on our social media pages, tell people about us, and also how will you tell us, oh, we've done a good job. It's actually going ahead to do something with what you have learned today. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to stop recording. Yes, to those that have asked for the recording, we will definitely send it to your email addresses. So